So that's right, I'm Ollie Lewis, CEO, founder of The Fifth. For anyone that doesn't know, we're a global social and influence marketing agency, headquartered here in London, part of News Corp globally. But we're here to talk to Philipp. And look, I'm pretty excited about this. I think before I met Philipp, you know, I knew a couple of things. I knew you were a leader, certainly a leading figure in the procurement space, an incredible career at the likes of Puma and Adidas, and a big agency background. So I thought, cool, this is a marketing procurement conversation, right? Wrong. It certainly isn't. This is a conversation about marketing excellence and transformation at a level really I hadn't expected. So we're going to try and unpack that. I think I'm not even going to read out your job title because it's a wordsmith, but maybe you can tell us what it means as a starting point, and then we can start talking more about the role that you're doing there and the transformation that the buyer's on. But so starting point, what is your role? It's not in procurement. No. You actually report into the CMO, right?
Correct.
Maybe you could just start to unpack it there and give us an intro to that.
Great. Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you to Brand Innovators for having us. Great to be here and spending the day with you guys. Yeah, so my journey actually is an interesting one. So I started in marketing 20 years ago, almost on the day actually. Went to agency for a bit, then into marketing procurement. And it all culminated now in this role I've been doing for the last 4 years, where I've been asked by the CMO to join her team and to really elevate our relationships, especially with agencies, which were still quite tactical at the time, into proper strategic partnerships. It was basically like an empty piece of paper. I could write my own job description at the time, which was quite intimidating. Also, it started right at COVID, so I did it all from my kitchen table for about a year and a half, which was, for such a role, not an easy one. But yeah, it has been really an inspiring journey, and I think it is something which I will encourage, you know, more and more companies, brands, clients to do, because I think it will help improve the way how we partner up with our agencies and other partners.
So what we're talking about here is almost a paradigm shift and a reversal of the relationship from agency to client, which means that your mission is to become the client of choice. How do you, as a consumer health business, you know, compete? Well, firstly, what does a client of choice really mean? And then how do you actually compete with, let's say, big FMCG brands that have the budgets and the profile that naturally fall into that lane of becoming an agency's client of choice? But starting, you know, you showed me previously a ChatGPT definition of client of choice, which I thought was quite interesting. So maybe we can just define with what are we actually talking about here, and then how do you set up a framework to, as I said, as a consumer health business, to compete in that lane?
I think it started with our ambition to stand out as a client. I mean, where we were as a company in marketing, you know, we're not a marketing powerhouse, right? We are a science company, and we have 3 different divisions. One is a pharmaceutical division, so similar to AstraZeneca, you know, very, very heavily regulated. You cannot do much. We are maybe the closest to the consumer. We are a consumer health business, so we are over the counter, but that also has regulations in different countries. In some countries it's less, in some countries it's more. And our third business is an agricultural business, so very B2B, very decentralized. And yeah, in that context, you know, although we are not small. We do 47 billion turnover. Our consumer business doing 6 billion. It's still tough for us to stand out, right? Like, you know, everybody is, of course, more geared towards, as an agency, geared towards, you know, exciting brands, fashion brands, sports brands, classical consumer brands. So we felt that we have to do something else to get the attention of our agencies, because in the current climate, right, talent is a bottleneck. If you want to get the talent, you need to stand out. If you want to get the best talent of your agency, you need to stand out. You need to be in the top 3 clients. So my ambition, our ambition, is to really be one of those top 3 clients of our agencies, to get access to that talent. And we don't have the budgets, you know, we cannot compete with some of the big ones. So we have to do other things. We have to just be a better client, do things which, you know, excite them equally as us, and excite the people working with our partners to work on our account rather than someone else's? So that's basically, that was our starting point. And we have, over the last few years, I would say, derived and implemented a few tools which help us doing exactly that.
Maybe you could just talk into that framework. What are you practically doing, and how are you measuring that in terms of the relationship within your agency? How do you really quantify becoming one of those top 3 clients and then maintain it?
Yeah, I mean, quantifying that is hard, and I guess, you know, it depends a little bit on the agencies, and we rely that, you know, they also understand what we are trying to do and buy into it. But I can say, from what I'm hearing and how we work with them, or how we have worked with them over the last few years, it is actually working, right? So just to explain a couple of tools which we are doing, we actually started to change pitching. Pitching, especially in the creative space, as maybe most of you know, is a tricky one for agencies, right? And I think most agencies complain about, you know, how pitching is draining resources, is putting pressure onto them, especially when they are not even properly fair, which sometimes happens, right? Because for certain reasons, agencies have to put on a pitch just to meet certain numbers. So we, for example, we do something called the pitch in a day process, which actually is exactly what it says. I mean, there is more to it, obviously, but it basically means that we reduce the amount of resourcing needed from agencies, and we work in a workshop-style environment for a day with our agencies, and that's basically the pitch, right? So we go into the agency in the morning, we brief them on 2 tasks or on 1 task, and then we work through that with them, that task, and at the end of the day, the agency presents back to us. And you wouldn't believe how much you can actually do in a day. And it has really worked, because the focus is therefore to really understand the chemistry between your teams, to understand how you can work together, right? And that takes the fakeness, which a pitch is in a certain way. It takes it as much out as you can. Of course, there's always a certain level of fake, because it's not real life. But in an environment like this, you can actually, I think, just create something where you can take a better decision. So that's, for example, something we have done, and agencies love it. And they come to me and say, "Wow, why are not doing more clients do this?" And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's a shame, because I think this is something which can really truly change the way how you can start a relationship, and that feeds into your relationship straight there and can elevate it from the beginning.
And what level of engagement do you personally have throughout the agency groups, and where do you navigate? So just almost a little bit of a day in the life. I mean, we're talking about marketing excellence here. Pitch in the day will come around not perhaps as frequently. So what are you actually doing in order to elevate buyers' standing within the agency groups and continuing to build that relationship? I mean, are we talking about very localized conversations, or do these become more global and certainly at a group level?
Yeah, so basically for us, you know, we're quite decentralized as a company. So we have a lot of relationships at the local level and the regional level. I sit at a global level, and I try to bring basically these things all together. So at the beginning, I started to develop a concept around agency performance management, which, you know, is pretty standard, right? I mean, most of us do these kind of surveys. But what we have done, basically, we do it twice a year, everywhere in the organization, with the same kind of questionnaire. But what we also do, we really put a focus, and I use our procurement teams for that. So I don't have a team, so I leverage our procurement teams for that. So they derive an action plan out of these surveys twice a year, and they really in between the surveys, do so-called pulse checks to stay on top of that relationship constantly, right? And that really has helped to make sure that we really understand the health of the relationship. And that's, you know, in the past we haven't done that, right? Like we did a survey once a year, and you know it was okay, and you know we high-fived each other, you know, it's all going well. But in the end, that's not the case, right? So you have to really find a way to create an environment where you can trust each other, where you can get to the bottom of certain issues. And if you then, let's say every 2 months, you do pulse checks and you focus on the relationship, and you have just conversations about the relationship, you understand where problems lie, and then you can actually solve them before they become real issues. So that's one example. That happens across, and that really has helped us, to have a solid basis and a solid foundation for the relationship. And in addition to that, we do various different things. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had the top-to-tops with 2 of the big holding companies here in London, where our C-suite meets the C-suite of the holding company. And it's a day where they just engage on topics where holding company and us can actually identify areas where they can actually do a bit more and leverage each other more, right? We can leverage each other more by having conversations on which we would normally not have. If we would just do a scope of work at an agency level and we do, we want this from you on this campaign, agency response, you don't get to, more strategic topics where you can, for example, find ways to, just to work together. So one example was actually in COVID, one of the holding companies was working for the WHO and support the communication around how to encourage people to get vaccinated. We at the same time, we actually developed, or we tried to develop, didn't really work out unfortunately, but we tried to develop a vaccine. So out of this conversation, we started to work together and helped each other. Or in that case, we helped the agency to develop a more focused communication around their work on vaccination use. So things like this happens in these type of conversations. And then we do a creative incubator. That's basically a project where agencies are being invited to pitch to us any ideas they feel are relevant on our brands. And our CMO then rewards or recognizes the best ones, owns the process, pays it for it centrally, and we execute those ideas then together with our countries. And that really has inspired our teams to be more bold, to be more creative. I mean, we just heard from AstraZeneca how hard it is. And although we're an OTC, we're the OTC division, so we have less regulation, but we still have regulation. And we come from a background where people are very risk averse, where you have to everything still has to get checked by something called LMR. Claims are very restricted. So we needed something where we can show to especially our teams, that creativity is possible and that you can maybe do more than you realize. And again, for that, agencies can help us because they are out there, they do work on other brands, on other industries, and it has been a game changer for us.
I think this is fascinating, but it's obviously there's more to this, right? The journey you've been on there, being within the business for the last 4 years is really interesting. But just closing the chapter on that slightly, the idea that the partnership is entirely two-way is the step change moving forward, right? I mean, as an agency space, it's always the dream to be able to move into a partnership conversation and relationship with your client, but for you to be looking at it from the same position coming back is clearly working. But part of this shift and we touched on it earlier, that you want to try and compete to be the client of choice in an FMCG space is only half the story, because actually it feels like your brand and the way in which you are now showing up in social and have done since COVID in particular is starting to act more like an FMCG brand. And is that deliberate? Is that very much an intentional, driven by this centre of excellence in marketing and by your new CMO? Or CMO new into over the last few years. Could you perhaps talk to that and the journey you're on there to change consumer health in brand marketing generally?
Well, yeah, I think we realized that we couldn't continue the way how we operated in the past, right? We were, as I said, we were in a consumer or an over-the-counter business within a pharma company. The mindset was very, very traditional. And we were struggling. We compare ourselves to 6 peers or to 5 peers, us and 5 peers, and that's Haleon, that's P&G Health, that's Sanofi, that's Kenvue, used to be Johnson & Johnson, and we back in 2017, 2018, we were dead last in all measures, and we realized, that it just doesn't work. The way how we approach things, it doesn't work. So I think the management did a smart move in bringing in experienced FMCG people to lead the company or to lead the division. And our CMO, our CEO was then hired from Nestle. Then the CMO, Patricia, came from Unilever and Heineken. And that really was a shift in the way how we run the business. We run it pretty much like an FMCG company. And while there's still regulation, you can actually still, you can do a lot more, but you need the mindset. You need to change the people's mindset. And that's what I think has changed fortunes for us. And we have grown significantly over the past 4 or 5 years. We were lucky going into COVID because of our portfolio in consumer health. You know, you have certain portfolios, or some competitors of us have a higher, let's say, cough and cold portfolio, which of course at the beginning of COVID, no one was out, so cough and cold dropped significantly. We had we have a high nutritionals portfolio, so for us, you know, COVID, boom, went through the roof. Now we see the reverse trend, so now we're suffering a little bit because of that. But I think in that case, it helped us to, you know, to accelerate the way of how we work and to bring partners in, to work with them in a different way, and to showcase to them that healthcare is an interesting space. And I mean, as well as I think mentioned before, COVID has changed it for us, right? Healthcare was not something people really put a lot of, gave a lot of attention to. But with COVID, it became such a topic. And now, I mean, if you now look in health and wellness, I mean, everybody's in health and wellness. So for us, it's also tough because we compete now against a lot more players, not just the traditional ones, but of course the new brands, the DTC brands, and we have to be smart there. That's why working in a different way is absolutely critical. Otherwise, we'll have no choice.
Because traditionally, health marketing would have been about product, but largely about the science and the data, largely driven and targeting healthcare professionals, and potentially. Is that shift now to consumer in the way in which you're showing up? Has that changed the types of partnerships that you need, and therefore the types of capabilities? And I guess, from a reference point of our space, how important has our capabilities in social and influencer now in your agency roster? And have you had to rethink that more often in the last couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't think as much of individual agencies. We think more of agency ecosystems and capabilities, right? And we recognize that on different brands, we need different capabilities and different, what we call agency ecosystems around those brands. But if we have partnerships like described, if we have built partnerships in the way we have done over the last few years, it's also easier to get the right capability on your individual brands and adjust them based on the different needs in different places on different things. So that's something we keep evolving. And also I think the next step for us is to make sure that our partners work better together. I think that is difficult, right? But we are starting to do things which also help facilitate a better collaboration between our partners, and that's where I'm most excited about, because I think if we can do that better and find ways for our partners to really push each other, for the benefit of our brands, then I think we have a real competitive advantage.
And in this, we talked about this. Are you referencing your joint business plans initiatives? And maybe you could just talk to that and how you've structured that. And is this something that's going to become a much bigger part of both marketing procurement, but also the way in which these partnerships develop between clients and agencies as capabilities and skills become more differentiated? And we haven't touched on AI and the role that potentially that brings to these partnerships and relationships. But how does the joint business plan actually work in reality?
Yeah, so the joint business plan is something I wasn't also familiar with until a few years ago. And I think we started to work on one with Google initially. So that's one of the partners I look after. And the idea is not to just create a scope and say, okay, that's my scope here, partner, please execute. And Google is different anyways, but it's also relevant for agencies. It's basically to define basically a joint business plan where you define this is what my ambition is as Bayer or as a client. This is what my ambition is as a partner. Where is the common ground, and how can we basically achieve that common ground together? What are then initiatives and things we can do to achieve those common objectives? And we have done this with Google. We have then scaled it to our media agency. And actually this year, for the first time, we do an integrated joint business plan across search, Google, Mediacom, our media agency, content, our content partner, and also measurement. And they basically work all towards the same goals. We have defined that together. And also we have regular meetings where all these partners are in the same room and work together on it, right? And for some things, Mediacom is leading it, the media agency. For other areas, content leads, and it creates just a very different environment how you work together with your partners. And I think it's not easy. We have to keep changing it, but actually I have to say, it works maybe better than I expected. So this year, doing this for the first time, you really also see how these partners try to push each other in a way, right? And try to showcase, of course, what they can do, and it creates, I would say, healthy tension. I think that's maybe also one of the things which we have to be aware of. You want to sometimes create tension in the system. Healthy tension, creative tension. We shied away in the past from having difficult conversations because it's not comfortable with your partners, right? To do that, but I think it prohibits you from becoming better. You have to have a bit of tension, and tools like this help you to have that, and that has been quite enlightening. And we have started this process now. It will take surely time, and it will never end, but. Yeah, I think that's the direction of travel, and it can help, I think, the entire industry to just work better together.
We'll do a 2-minute warning because I think we're running short on time for any questions. But just before we come to questions, you touched on it a little bit there. Maybe I have to ask because there is a growing trend of agency consolidation, both in terms of groups coming together and becoming more full service in market, but equally a lot of M&A activity into new capabilities. Is that a trend that you think is being driven by this need from clients in order to have a more joint up business plan and approach, or something you just see continuingly from an agency model perspective? And what's your take on it, and do you think it's going to continue?
Yeah, I would say agency consolidation is basically for me, was on the topics the day I started in procurement, about 13 years ago. I think it depends a little bit on the company and the brand portfolio. For big multinationals like us, different brands, different countries, you simply cannot manage in the way how, if you work with individual agencies everywhere, right? Like I remember when I started at Bayer, I think we had like 5,000 agencies, right? I mean, no one can manage that, right? So in that case, it's necessary. But also when you think about how you then what your outcome needs to be, it has to be managed in a different way. You cannot do it, individually. For smaller brands, for local brands, which are just in one market, it's maybe a bit different. But for us, I think it's important. However, what I would say, while it was a procurement exercise when I started, it was literally about, cutting numbers. We just need to cut, and we need to reduce BOs and all of that stuff. I think now it has developed into a much more focused and, let's say, content-driven conversation, right? Like where the focus is, what do we need and how can we serve that demand around the brand? Talking about an agency ecosystem, it's now more an ecosystem conversation than just a pure number conversation. And I think that helps both sides, right? But I think that has to happen. Otherwise, if it's driven by procurement, no disrespect to my former colleagues, it's a problem, right? Because I think then you will also inevitably cut good talent. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the talent. You need the right skill set on your brands, and you need to do that in a way that enables that.
This is wonderful. I've learned so much just speaking with you over the last few days, and again on stage today. I don't know if anyone has any questions before we wrap up. We do. Lovely.
It's a good question. I've been evolving I call it agency management dashboard over the last couple of years, and it's changing. I mean, yeah, it's different things. First and foremost, my starting point was our agency surveys, for example, where we look at how well, on average, are our agency relationship scoring from our teams and also from the agency teams. So that's one measure. Another one is now, for example, awards, right? Like we haven't actually talked about awards. So for us, awards, creative awards, wasn't even a topic 5 years ago. But with also Patricia, our CMO, coming in, Cannes Lions became an important one. Effie's became important ones, and award success does help, right? So we measure award entries because. Award wins is hard, especially in Cannes. But like, for example, to facilitate that our teams are entering awards and feel confident about their work, that's another measure. And then at the moment, actually, I work with our procurement team to develop let's say a more holistic performance measurement framework with different measure points. So, for example, one measure is we use a company called Metrics Lab, and that is a testing measure. We of course then brand health is a measure. We use other companies for that. So it becomes now a more of a, let's say, a more democratic way of measuring it, not just single data points, because then of course that can be skewed in different ways. But that is something which is evolving, but it's agency health, I would say, agency relationship health, awards, and others, and all together basically makes up that picture.
Thank you for that. Any other burning questions, or we will thank Philipp for his time. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Philipp. That's great.